Bane couldn't see more than a few meters ahead through the thick vegetation, but he knew they were close now. He could sense the power of the temple calling to him from behind the impenetrable curtain of tangled vines and twisted branches. Clamping down with the dark side, he crushed the last of the mighty rancor's will to resist and urged it forward. Suddenly they broke through into a clearing, a circle nearly 100 meters across. In the very center stood the Rakatan temple. The structure rose nearly 20 meters to the sky, a monument of carved rock and stone. The only entrance was a broad archway at the peak of an enormous staircase carved into an outside wall of the temple itself. Its surface was pristine, stark and pure, unsullied by clinging moss or climbing ivy. The ground surrounding it were barren, but for a carpet of short, soft grass. It was as if the jungle feared to creep forward and reclaim the tainted stone. Bane leapt down from his mount, all his attention focused on the structure towering before him. Freed from his power, the rancor turned and fled back into the undergrowth. The terrible crashing cacophony of its escape was overlaid with its tortured howls, but Bane noticed neither sound. He had no more use for the rancor. He had found what he was searching for. He took a trembling step forward before stopping short. He shook his head to clear it. The dark side was strong here, so strong it made him feel lightheaded. That meant this was a place of danger. He couldn't afford to be wandering around in a stupor. According to the accounts he'd read in the archives, the temple had once been protected by a powerful energy shield, one that required an entire Rakatan tribe, of which each individual had been a powerful force user, to bring it down. He didn't sense any such barrier, but only a fool would proceed without caution. As he had done in the tombs on Korriban, he began to probe the area around him with the force. He felt the echoes of the safeguards that had once protected the temple, but they were so weak as to be almost non-existent. He wasn't surprised. The shields around the temple had been fueled by the power of the orbiting Starforge. With its destruction, the shields had failed, along with all the other defenses that had made the unknown world a graveyard of ships. Wondering what else had been lost in the Starforge's violent end, he crossed the surrounding courtyard and mounted the temple steps. The staircase was steep but wide, and the stone was neither worn nor cracked despite its age. It ended at a small landing leading to the stone archway of the entrance, 3/4 of the way up. He paused at the threshold, then passed through. He had a brief sensation of what it must have felt like for those who came before him. The anticipation, the thrill of discovery. Once inside, however, it only took a few minutes of exploration for his excitement to fade. Like Korriban, the temple had been stripped of anything of value. He searched for hours, beginning with the top floor where he had first come in, and proceeding deeper and deeper until he reached the bottom level, combing every centimeter of the empty halls and deserted rooms. Yet even though his search was proving futile, he didn't despair. The crypts in the Valley of the Dark Lords had felt drained, used up, and sucked dry. The unknown world felt different. There was still power here. There had to be something here for him to find. He was certain of it. He refused to accept another failure. It was in the lowest level of the temple, far below the planet's surface, that his obsessive quest finally ended. When he first stumbled into the room, his attention was immediately drawn by the remains of a massive computer, but it was clearly beyond any hope of repair. And then he noticed something on the stone wall behind the computer. The surface was etched with a number of arcane symbols, the language of the Rakata, perhaps. They meant nothing to him, and he would have dismissed them without a second glance, except that one of them was glowing. He almost hadn't noticed it at first. It was subtle, a faint violet hue tracing the edges of one of the unusual shapes. It was almost perfectly level with his eye. As he stared at it, the glow grew stronger. He stepped forward and reached out tentatively with his hand. The light winked out, startling him into taking a step back. He reached out again, but this time, instead of using his hand, he reached out with the force. The stone character flared to life. Struggling to contain his eagerness, he again extended his hand and pressed hard against the glowing symbol. There was the sound of turning gears and the grinding of stone on stone. The seams of a small square, less than half a meter on each side, took shape in the wall as a section of stone pushed out. Bane stepped back as the chunk toppled down from the wall and shattered on the ground at his feet, revealing a small cubbyhole behind it. With no hesitation, he thrust his arm into the darkness to seize whatever was inside. His fingers wrapped around something cold and heavy. He drew it out and stared in wonder at the artifact in his hand. Slightly larger than his fist, it had the shape of a four-sided pyramid, a tiny replica of the temple in which he stood. Bane instantly recognized his prize for what it was, a Sith Holocron, a repository of forbidden knowledge just waiting to be unlocked. The art of constructing holocrons had been lost for countless millennia, but from his studies Bane knew something of the basic theory behind their design. The information they contained was stored within an interwoven, self-encrypted digital matrix. A holocron's protection systems couldn't be circumvented or broken. The information couldn't be sliced or copied. There was only one way to access the knowledge captured within. Each holocron was imprinted with the personality of one or more masters to serve as guardians. When accessed by one capable of understanding its secrets, the holocron would project tiny, crude, hologramic images of the various guardians. Through interaction with the student, the programmed simulacra would teach and instruct in much the same way as would a flesh and blood mentor. However, all accounts of Sith holocrons had made mention of the ancient symbols adorning the four-sided pyramid. The holocron he held in his hand was almost completely blank. Could this possibly predate even the holocrons of the ancient Sith? Was this a relic of the Rakata themselves? Would the guardians of the holocron be the imprinted personalities of alien masters from a time even before the birth of the Republic? And if so, would they be willing to teach him their secrets? Would they even respond to him? Moving carefully, he set the holocron gently on the floor, then sat down before it. He crossed his legs and began the deep, slow breathing of a meditative trance. Gathering and focusing his energy, Bane projected a wave of dark force power out to engulf the small relic on the floor. The holocron began to sparkle and shimmer in response. He held his breath in anticipation, unsure what would come next. A small beam of light projected out from the top. The particles scattered and diffused. They began to shift and spin, coalescing into a cloaked figure, its features completely hidden by the hood of its heavy robe. Then a voice spoke, crisp and clear. "I am Darth Revan, Dark Lord of the Sith." The empty halls of the temple above trembled with the reverberations of Bane's triumphant, booming laughter.